We found out we were pregnant in October of 2014. We were very excited. We had been trying for a little over a year, and so we were super excited and just kind of couldn't wait to meet our son or daughter. And we found out at 16 weeks, our quad screen test results came back with elevated AFP levels, and the doctor said there was a chance that she would have Down syndrome or spina bifida. So we did a verified test the next week to kind of see what exactly we were going to be working with this pregnancy. And that is when we found out we were having a little girl. And we also found out that everything was great. She didn't have Down syndrome, she didn't have spina bifida, but her alpha fetal protein levels were really high, and we didn't at that point know why. At our 22-week ultrasound, she was only measuring the size of a 20-week-old baby. And the doctor was a little concerned, but he didn't want to make any diagnosis yet. So we came back 3 weeks later and did another growth scan, and that's when he diagnosed us with IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction. He said that the placenta was not doing its job, it wasn't feeding her as it should be, and so she was very small. At that point, he admitted us to the hospital where we stayed for 5 days to monitor the baby 3 times a day and also to get steroid shots in anticipation for delivery. We did not deliver during that time at the hospital, but I was placed on bed rest at 25 weeks and went home to be on bed rest with daily Dopplers and BPP, biophysical profiles on the baby. And at 27 and a half weeks, we went in for a routine daily checkup at the hospital, and there was protein in my urine and my blood pressure was high, so they admitted me to the hospital again. And this time, they told me I was developing something called HELP syndrome, which is something that affects not only the baby but also myself. And basically my body was rejecting the baby, and the placenta was in danger of detaching and cutting off her oxygen and killing her. So again, we had steroid shots, and we were set to deliver the morning of April 1st, 2015. We did not want to have an April Fool's baby. We were very adamant that we didn't want it. And the doctor actually came in that morning, the morning before, and said, okay, we're going to have a C-section tomorrow on the 1st of April. And we said, well, we really would prefer not to have her on the 1st of April. And she checked the C-section queue, and of course no one was signed up for a C-section on the 1st of April, so there was plenty of availability. Shockingly enough, the morning of April 1st, the doctor came in and said we weren't having a baby that day, that all of my labs looked good, my platelets were good, my liver functions were stable, so we were not having a baby. Because I had gotten a steroid shot 48 hours ago, it was still in my system, so it was still kind of helping me feel good and helping my labs improve. That afternoon, I started to feel worse. I had upper right quadrant pain. There was a thunderstorm that evening at the hospital, I remember, and I was sitting by the window watching the thunderstorm roll in, and the doctor walked in after taking my labs and said, we're having a baby right now. And so we were rushed to surgery, and we had an emergency C-section that evening. So our daughter, Ella Kathleen, was born at 9:12 p.m. She weighed 1 pound 7 ounces. She cried when she was born. She was rushed off to her own little room off of the delivery room, and Chris, her daddy, got to go see her for the first time. And I got to see her for a little while before I went to my recovery room, and then Chris went with her to the NICU and kind of helped her get comfortable there as much as he could. And then we went and saw her again for the evening as she was getting settled into her room. And then we went to recover and to sleep for a little bit for the first time in a couple days. As we got more comfortable in the NICU and stuff, it was definitely a roller coaster ride. Being dismissed from the hospital without your baby is a horrible experience. And I remember it was a Saturday when I was discharged, and I remember going down and visiting Ella and just being heartbroken and saying, how can we leave our baby here? It's not right to be discharged without your baby. And we would call on and check on her in the middle of the night. And that next week it was very difficult in terms of Chris juggling going back to work, me just delivering, having to pump and keep up the milk supply and freeze it and store it for Ella in the NICU. She had multiple tests done on her. She didn't have any brain bleeds, which was huge for a baby that was born at 28 weeks. And then we went to visit her the next Saturday morning, and it was just a lovely Saturday. The weather was warm. It was a beautiful April day, and we were talking to her. We got to do her cares, where we get to take her temperature, we change her diaper, and then we went to lunch and at the Ronald McDonald House just down the hall from her. And we came back, and she had an episode that she couldn't recover from, and she ultimately passed away. And I remember thinking, this Saturday before, I was so upset about leaving her in the hospital and having to go home. And now we had to leave the hospital permanently, knowing that she would never come home with us.
That's the hardest thing, is that you have your daughter and it's your first daughter, and you wreck people's lives when you talk about her, but you have to talk about her to honor her. That's the hardest thing to do, but I have to keep talking about her and trying to do whatever I can to reach out to other people and talk and just let them know about Ella.
The other thing that I feel like we don't talk about enough when we talk about Ella is the fact that she had a spunky personality, just like me. Like, she was ornery. She had long fingers and toes like her daddy. She had this full head of blonde hair. And I feel like when people find out she was born at 28 weeks, they all kind of were like, oh, well, you should have expected her to die. We never expected our baby to die. 90% of 28-weekers live. So we had no reason to believe. And why would you think that anything you brought into this world is going to die? So now we honor Ella in different ways. And we do our best to advocate for ways the hospital can improve their bereavement care, and also just to talk to people about infant loss and not be afraid of the stigma. A lot of people, when I say, oh, I have a daughter, she's 10 days old, she lives in heaven, they get really uncomfortable and they don't know how to react. And that's really difficult to kind of work around. So that's something that we've been advocating for.